Hello, gents. Welcome to the World Class Dads podcast. This is the show where it's my jab. Words are tough. Where it's my job to connect with world-class performers, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, athletes, folks who are doing really extraordinary things in this world, but are also amazing dads, and really dig into how it is that they've mastered their crafts while still showing up and being intentional fathers and being there for their families. This is a special episode, though, and this one is specifically for new and expecting dads, but I think can really be insightful to dads at any stage in the game. I remember when my wife was pregnant, going into Apple Podcasts and searching expecting dads. I literally had no idea what to expect in fatherhood, was scared shitless, and wanted to arm myself with some knowledge. And what I found was that the results were, shall I say, less than thrilling. It doesn't seem that there's a ton out there to help soon-to-be dads prepare to dive into this wild and wonderful experiment that is fatherhood. And in all fairness, my opinion is that no amount of information or advice can really prepare you to be a dad. It's all about experiencing it and growing into the role, just like reading biology books will never make you a surgeon. But learning some foundational knowledge from mentors who can guide us is always a powerful tool in any pursuit. Therefore, I decided to start putting together some compilation episodes that pull advice from past guests for new dads and expecting dads specifically. In about 80% of the episodes I've done, I've asked some form of this question, whether it's the advice that they've given or that they would give to their younger self upon the arrival of their first kid, the best fatherhood advice they've been given, or their advice to new and expecting dads that they come across. The other advantage of this type of episode for all listeners, not just new dads, is that you can get a bite-sized sample of previous episodes and guests. So if you haven't listened to them all yet, you can get some of their top advice and also decide if there are any episodes that you want to go back and listen to. It's always a struggle of mine in the infinite abyss of podcast episodes of what to listen to, and especially looking back on previous episodes of shows that I've found. So hopefully this will point you to some content and to some guests that really resonate with you. So this is part one of what I anticipate to be an ongoing series. This one includes advice from guests 1 through 10. That's Kyle Kingsbury, Tucker Max, Mark Bell, Kelly Sterett, Hal Elrod, Joe Desenna, Kevin Kelly, Tim Kennedy, David Heinemeier Hansson, and Brent Gleeson. And we'll kick the fun off with the guest from episode number 1, the man who kicked it all off here at the World Class Dads, Kyle Kingsbury, who is a former MMA fighter in the UFC, served as the director of human optimization at Onnit, and has been a multiple-time guest of the Joe Rogan Experience, and now hosts the massively successful Kyle Kingsbury podcast. Here's what Kyle had to say.
Yeah, one of my best friends growing up, Levent Niazi, I don't think it's his quote, but he's always said it since we were 12 years old. Don't talk about it, be about it. And that's just it. Like you can talk till you're blue in the face. You can read a book, and like Paul Chek says, you can be the smartest guy in the room who doesn't know shit. If all you've ever done is read those books and regurgitated them, but never actually started to ground those into your own experience, it doesn't do a whole lot of good. But, Ben Greenfield wrote like a short ebook that was like 10 or 12 ways to raise superhuman kids. And one of the things he said is, let them see the things you do that are important. So even before they're ready to work out in front of them. If mom and dad are doing yoga together or doing a little garage workout and they've got to sit in there in their little, whatever thing before they know how to walk, that's starting to imprint. And they start to not only see their parents doing that, but they start to believe, because they are their parents, they start to believe that this is me. They identify with the activity itself. And, mom and dad are both athletes. I'm an athlete too. It's just the way that it is, right? It's the way that through that programming, they start to see it for themselves as, yeah, this is what we do, and it's not, I'm not a drill sergeant. I'm sure, a lot of people have seen Chris Bell and Mark Bell's movie Trophy Kids. It's pretty horrific to watch on Netflix. It's not a fun thing. It makes your stomach turn. I'm not a drill sergeant when it comes to anything, but just in having fun with my son, he's in there, he can knock out 7 pull-ups on a ring at 5 years old. He can do a lot of things because it's just a part of that. And it's never me in there saying, give me one more, squeeze out another, or yelling or any of that stuff. It's like, we're just having fun in there. And through having fun as a practice in whatever we're doing, he gravitates towards some things and doesn't gravitate towards others, but it's loose enough to where he keeps showing up. And through that consistency, he's actually good at a lot of these things that we just, when we started out, it was just him watching us do.
Some brilliant wisdom there from Kyle. Next up, we're joined from episode number 2 by the legendary Tucker Max. Tucker has had 4 books on the New York Times bestseller, which have sold over 4.5 million copies worldwide. He is only the 3rd writer after Malcolm Gladwell and Michael Lewis to ever have 3 books on the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list at one time. And he was even nominated to the Time Magazine 100 Most Influential list in 2009. Here's what advice Tucker had for us.
To me, the family's first.
Right.
I am nothing without my family. And I don't mean that literally. Of course, I'm an individual, etc. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the first priority in my life is not me, it is my family. Although, I will say, and this is one of those weird paradoxes, even though my priority is my family is my first priority, the way I can show up best for my family is to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. Right? So I've never liked the idea. A lot of men especially, and although there are a lot of women like this too, so I don't want to discount that. But there are a lot of men who are what I call martyrs, family martyrs. They'll destroy themselves. They'll sacrifice themselves. And I don't mean make sacrifices. They will literally sacrifice themselves for their family. And I always look at them. I'm like, dude, do you think your kids would rather have you or not have you?
Right.
And so and even though they're telling themselves they're doing it with the best intentions, and they may be, I'm not a believer in sacrificing myself for my family. Yeah. Even though they're the first priority, those are not the same thing. I believe in taking care of myself, both because I respect myself and because I want to show up as best possible for my family.
Man, there's a lot to take away from Tucker's advice there, but so important. Sacrifice for your family, but don't sacrifice yourself. Your family needs you to be there, to be strong, to be present, to be the best version of yourself for them. Next up on episode number 3, we were lucky to be joined by Mark Bell. Mark is a world record-holding powerlifter, innovator, founder, CEO, speaker, author, husband, and father. He founded the super training gym, Slingshot, Power Magazine, Mark Bell's Power Project podcast, which is a top 50 health and fitness podcast, and is currently developing his nutrition and supplement line. He's built a multi-million-dollar business empire and is currently ranked in the top 10 of all-time power lifters with lifts, this is just crazy, including 1,080 pounds on the squat, 854 pounds on the bench, and 766 pounds on the deadlift. That's nuts in itself, but here's what Mark had to say about fatherhood. If you could go back to 2004 when your son was born, hop in the time machine, talk to young Mark Bell, is there some piece of wisdom or advice or just something you might say to that new dad, Mark Bell, just to push you in the right direction?
There's a quote from Mr. Rogers that I really love a lot, and it pertains to children, and it says, you don't have to do anything spectacular in this world to be loved. And I think that pertains to everybody. So if I was to tell myself anything, it would be that, because as a dad, you don't need, you're going to end up being spectacular just by doing the little things every day. And you're going to end up being a dad just by being you, just by going through the experience of it. And you'll have the same dumb dad jokes that your dad had, and you'll end up wearing the same stupid, out of fashion outfits that your dad wore. Like, all these things they're all going to happen. And you'll have, a lot of times dads have great quotes and different things like that. And you'll just get there. You'll end up there. And don't think that you need to do anything spectacular. Another quote that I like is from a famous bodybuilder named Jay Cutler, who's a 4-time Mr. Olympia. Jay Cutler says, don't be fancy, be consistent. That's another thing with being a dad. It's like, hey man, you just got to be a dad, a little bit every day. Just throw a little dadness in here and there, sprinkle it out throughout each day, get a little time in for yourself. It is important. That is another important aspect of being a mom or dad, being a parent, is you need time to yourself. You need time to work on self-improvement, because the more that you can do that, the more that you can share with your children. My kids at this point, my son, he loves to like film stuff, and he loves to, he like writes scripts and stuff, right? And so he was telling me one day, he's like, we kind of live in the middle of nowhere. He's like, I can't do this, I can't do that. And then I said, I was about to talk, I was about to say something, and he goes, he's like, stop. He's like, I know. He goes, I know. It's my perspective, and I need to have a more positive outlook, and I have resources around. I was like, good. Okay, good. You got it. So that's kind of part of being a dad. You're going to have to repeat yourself a lot to a point of like nauseum. You're going to have to be patient. The last thing I want to kind of finish up with is, again, just being a parent and trying to juggle this whole thing is, I think it's really important, no matter how big the family is, and this could be really difficult, but if you have a lot of children, but you need to figure out time alone with your significant other. You need to figure out time alone with your child, and your significant other needs time alone with your child. Mm-hmm. You need to just every once in a while, you need to say, hey, you guys get a chance to hang out the last couple of weeks, like by yourselves, or has it always just been all of us, glommed together with the cousins over and the friends and so forth? I think these things are really important. So in my family, with our dynamics, I hang out with my wife. We go on dates all the time. We'll get away here and there. Her and I go for walks all the time. Then yesterday I walked with my son. We went on about a good 20-minute walk with our dog. And then I start going through the checklist of things, and I'm like, oh shit, I haven't had one-on-one time with Quinn in a little bit. So I need to kind of make sure that happens again. And we're not really trying to force anything or make anything, because, as your kids get to be teenagers, they don't always want to hang out with you, but we're trying to make sure that we're scraping up against it here and there and getting some of this done. And so any, new parents listening to this, I think, and then is that hard to do? That's not that hard to do. It might be something to kind of juggle all the time. And I'm not talking about that this needs to be done daily. This is something that you just want to kind of take a gander at, every other week or so, and just make sure that it's happening.
I mean, come on. That's just crazy good advice from Mark. Next up on episode number 4, we are joined by Kelly Sterett. Kelly is one of the world's top movement and mobility coaches for players in the NFL, MLB, NHL, and NBA, as well as Olympic gold medalists, elite military personnel, and other world-class athletes. He is also recognized as one of the top CrossFit coaches in the world. Beyond coaching, Kelly is a physical therapist, author, speaker, and co-founder of San Francisco CrossFit and The Ready State. His books Becoming a Supple Leopard, Ready to Run, and Desk Bound have each become New York Times and or Wall Street Journal bestsellers. Here is what we learned from Kelly. So if you could, we talked about a lot of really impactful things that I think can help myself and some of the dads who are listening, really fine tune and sharpen their fatherhood sword. But if you could go back in time and talk to yourself, when you were 31, you just had your first kid, is there one piece of wisdom or advice that you might impart upon yourself at that stage, kind of experiencing what you've experienced now and knowing what you do as a dad?
It's first of all, is this that you're going to have to work at some unsustainable intensities, and you're going to have to then also simultaneously back off. Otherwise, you'll implode.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I think is crucial. A project we're working on right now is, we think that in the 40s and 50s are your most important decades in terms of the durability of your health.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in your 30s, potentially where a lot of people become parents, you still can take the liberties of being a younger person, where you can get by on less sleep. I mean, they say having children is really the best for young people and rich people, and because you're young, you've got these reserves, and rich because you can get all the help you need.
Like a boat.
Well, what I'll say is that as a gym owner, I've witnessed enough guys in their mid 30s, early 40s who've sort of fallen apart. Right. And part of playing this long game is you can't get fat. You can't just drink all the time. Like, you're going to put yourself into a hole where you're not going to be able to thrive when it starts to matter most. You're going to have spent a lot of needless credits. So when you're a parent, now is the chance to really try to control something, right? Which means maybe I'm going to control my drinking or my THC use, or I'm going to control my food, right? So you can think, well, I can't go out and be a maniac in all these other sports and things that I used to do and how I define myself. So there's got to be some agency and some control. And that may mean you do yoga for 15 minutes in front of the YouTube. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. But you've got to think about this as a physical race as much as it is sort of a psycho-emotional thing. And I think what I have seen is it's easy to take that body for credit, and then all of a sudden you've cooked yourself, and it's difficult to dig yourself out of that hole. And, we're seeing a lot of, the guys in our neighborhood are heavy and they're pre-diabetic, and, we understand. Julie and I own a gym like that. We obviously cope with, we're in fitness, and that's one of our coping mechanisms. Instead of drinking, we exercise. I mean, that really is the thing that allows us to feel like less maniacs. But, as you track with parents who get older and older, and you'll see that, man, parents, sometimes you look around and we look grizzled in these school meetings because we are grizzled. And, and because you sort of, it's easy to burn through and sacrifice all the things that, like, you do not need to eat chicken McNuggets. Your kids don't need to eat chicken McNuggets. You need to be a little bit more ninja on a few things so that you can bridge to that moment where you start to open up again and can go to a class or start to lift weights. Or, I just think one of the things is, start taking your health a little bit more seriously when your children are young, because all of a sudden it's really hard to reverse course in your 40s. When you have the time, you're like, wow, I'm 15 pounds too heavy. I'm weak. I haven't, I'm stiff. You've been coasting on the fumes of your adolescence.
I'm so glad that Kelly took the time to talk about the importance of health and focusing on our health while we're young parents, so that as we progress further into life and our kids are a little bit older, we're feeling great, we're in great shape, and still have that health and that youthful energy about us. And trust me, he's the guy to talk about it between his coaching, and he just had total knee replacement and deadlifted 550 pounds like 3 months later. It's absolutely absurd. You could go look at it on his Instagram. It's nuts. Next up, we're joined from episode number 5 by my man, Hal Elrod. Hal's an entrepreneur, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and podcaster. He is best known for his 2012 best-selling book, The Miracle Morning, which has now grown into a personal development phenomenon, selling over 1 million copies and translated into 27 languages. His Miracle Morning online community has over 300,000 members on Facebook and is regarded as one of the fastest growing and most engaged online communities that is in existence. I love Hal. Me and him have connected a few times, but he just drops some dynamite. He is so tuned in as a dad, not to mention just how much success he's achieved in life. But I love chatting with him about the family stuff. And here's what he had to say. But I think you guys should definitely check out the full episode with Hal, because it was an absolute pleasure. if you could go back and talk to the yourself 11 years ago, right when your daughter was born, is there something that you've picked up, and we may have touched on in this conversation already, but that you would really want to instill in that brand new dad version of Hal?
Yeah, I think that, obviously everything I've shared so far for sure. But I think that one thing I wish I would have done, and damn it, this should be the catalyst for me to start it now because it's never too late. But
that's what this conversation is actually for. I'm trying to accept whatever this is.
Thank you. Some sort, going back to rituals and routines, some sort of ritual or routine around journaling, or maybe even selfie videos, like video journaling, for each of my kids. Right. And when I had cancer, that was when that was like, I was like, man, I never, like, they don't, if I go, what do they have where they would have me, and I like the idea of video blogs, right. Just so even if it's, if even, hey, today we did, like, at the end of the day, like a summary of what you guys did that day or what you love about them, or it can be different format every day. But yeah, that's the advice I'm giving to the dad, when I was first starting out, and the dad that I am now, because I still have not done that yet.
Yeah, what's the saying? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So
yeah,
such a great idea from Hal. One other way I've heard of implementing this is to start an email address for your kids when they're young, and you can send them emails. You can attach photos, videos, things like that. And then when they're older, you gift them that email address, the password, and the username. So maybe think about that. Our next guest was Joe Desenna. Joe is the CEO and founder of Spartan Race and The Death Race. He's a New York Times best-selling author of Spartan Up, Spartan Fit, and The Spartan Way, and also hosts the Spartan Up podcast. Joe is an intense dude. And if you go back and listen to the episode, that definitely comes through. He definitely instills that sense of that work ethic, and really prioritizes offering his kids the opportunity to overcome adversity. But here's what Joe had to say about the advice he would give. So if you could go back, though, and talk to yourself right when, your son was a young kid before the skiing incident and the wheelbarrow, is there any advice you'd give to yourself at that stage of just around being a dad and parenting?
I think like I said, I could be harder. We could all be harder. We could be intentional with putting obstacles in front of the kids. But I think to what you mentioned before is I need to definitely need to hold. Somebody had said to me a long time ago, you should do. You have 4 children. Once a week, go out to dinner alone with one of them.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great idea. And I haven't delivered on it. So I think what you said before is right. I think building that one-on-one relationship, whereas I'm just driving them and pushing them and sticking them in wheelbarrows and making them meet folks that have harder lives than they do. But I could use a little one-on-one time. I need to be better at that.
So you just said you have them meet people who have harder lives than they do. Is that something that you're intentional about? And what's the thought behind that?
Well, I think I study I call it the journey to success. No matter how you define success, you're going to go through the valley of hell because nobody achieves success easily. It requires work. In the valley of hell, 90% of people quit. That's why there's one Elon Musk, one Steve Jobs, one Thomas Edison, except 90% of people quit. Mm-hmm. The people that stick it out are able to change their frame of reference, change their perspective. And at that moment where you're in the valley of death and, you're on your 999th light bulb that hasn't worked, you're out of money. You're trying to get this electric car thing to work, and the short sellers are killing you in Elon Musk's case, and in Steve Jobs' case, they're out of money at Apple, and it looks like they're going to go bankrupt, right? At that moment, the naysayers are piling on. They're telling you shouldn't have done it. You've mortgaged your family. You've done everything you could using business examples. if you're able to change your perspective and reflect on like, well, at least I'm not living in Siberia. You know, at least I have my fingers and toes. At least we're not Normandy Beach, right? You go down the list. You have that ability to have gratitude towards what you have, what you do have, versus resentment towards what you don't. You're most likely one of the few that are going to dig your way out of the valley of death.
Joe, the story he mentioned at the beginning there of his son and the wheelbarrow is one that came up in the episode and is worth going back and listen to the whole episode just for that one. Our next guest who was with us on episode number 7 was Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly is the senior maverick at Wired magazine, which he co-founded back in 1993. His most recent book, The Inevitable, is a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller. And from 1984 through 1990, Kelly was the publisher and editor of the Whole Earth catalogs. He co-founded the Hackers Conference and was involved with the launch of the Well, which is a pioneering online service that started way back in 1985, so the early days of the web. He's also the founder of the popular website Cool Tools, which has been around since 2003. Kevin has a great perspective on fatherhood. His kids are a little bit older now, so he gives us, that perspective looking back over the last 30 years of being a dad. And again, another guy who we're just super fortunate to connect with. Here is the wisdom dropped on us by Kevin Kelly. Any other nuggets of wisdom that you would like to impart upon dads, young dads, especially dads who are ambitious in terms of they have projects they want to accomplish. They have, professional things they want to do, but not necessarily, definitely not at the expense of their families.
Yeah. My dad worked for a magazine, a company. He didn't work for the magazine itself. He worked for a magazine company, and he used to talk about his work. And I learned so much about how things worked from him talking about his own work at the dinner table. I tried to talk about, things that I was interested in working on with my kids as a way of, being with them and helping them to understand, what I was doing, although they didn't really understand it. But I think it was helpful. So I did bring them to work too, a lot. Partly because, may have to pick them up because the sitter couldn't. So we take them to work and they enjoyed that and seeing where I worked and their mom as well. So, I'm not sure I have anything profound to suggest with that other than, I think if you're ambitious, if you can have projects with your kids, working together with your kids, I think is maybe, the thing. And I have other friends, and one of them has 5 kids, and very ambitious, somebody you probably know, and, or have heard of. And they did projects all the time. So it wasn't, maybe they didn't have a family business, but they had family projects. And so he had 2 jobs, he had his main job and he had his other jobs with his kids. And I think, his kids have done great. And I think that might've been part of that thing. So I think like working with your kids, if you're a work oriented person, then think about working with your kids, even when they're small.
Kevin Kelly, a wise man. Tim Ferriss actually calls Kevin the real life, most interesting man in the world. And for good reason. Throughout our conversation, he just shared so much wisdom and life experience and is just a fascinating guy. Our next guest was Tim Kennedy. Tim is legitimately one of the baddest and busiest dudes on the planet. He is an active Ranger-qualified Green Beret Special Forces sniper with tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other locations around the world. He has founded and owns multiple businesses, including military-inspired clothing company Ranger Up and tactical training and self-defense company Sheepdog Response. Tim has hosted several television shows, including Hunting Hitler on the History Channel and Hard to Kill on the Discovery Channel. He fought professionally in the MMA for both Strikeforce and the UFC. And to round it all out, this upcoming school year, he's actually opening his own school for his son and all the other elementary aged kids in his community. This was one of the most inspiring conversations that we've had on the podcast so far. It would be hard to rank them, but he's definitely up there towards the top and shared so much knowledge. His perspective on the world is so unique because of how much he's seen and been through. Really, I truly enjoyed the conversation with Tim. Here's a little morsel of it. I'm sure just based on the life that you've led and the success you've experienced, and then also people seeing that you're just a kick-ass dad, that people, especially new dads, have asked you in the past kind of what advice you might have. Or if they haven't, then I'm asking you personally, for me, for young dads or new dads out there, is there any specific advice that you would impart upon them as they're just diving into this crazy world of fatherhood?
Yeah. You have to be a healthy thing as an individual, right? Like, when I say healthy, I'm not just talking about like fitness, which totally matters, right? I'm not just talking about like spirituality, which totally matters, like emotional capacity, which absolutely matters. I'm talking like a functioning, high functioning person, right? Like that means that you're a good lover to your wife, and that means that you're getting good, healthy sleep, and that means that you're like eating healthy, and that means that you're exercising every single day, and that means that you're a good employee, and that means that you're a good steward, and that means that you're a good citizen. Like you have to be all of those things. You can't not be any of those things and think that you're still going to be a good dad, right? Like I see assholes that like go and pretend to be a good parent, and I'm like, everybody sees through that, right? Like you're the Disneyland dad, and nothing's going to change positively for that kid because you're there for that moment. You have to be there for the moments, and they see all those kids are. These kids are so smart. They're so smart. They process information faster than you and I have ever have in our whole entire life. They've been marketed to from the moment they're born until the moment they're standing there in front of us in a variety of platforms that we can't even understand the algorithms that go into it, but they do, right? Consciously and subconsciously. And, you know, so your baby is 6 months old and it's saying blah, 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 da, 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 boo, 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 right? It knows every single word that you're saying. And more importantly, it understands the intent behind those words. And everything about how one human interacts with another human, they're learning from watching and hearing you. So you can try and grab those moments and think that you can shape the character and that you can impart values, but they're learning all of those from all of the moments outside of the moments that you think you're teaching. Because they're watching all the time.
Love it. Absolutely love the conversation with Tim. The next episode we had was with David Heinemeier Hansson on episode number 9. David, aka DHH, is the creator of Ruby on Rails and the founder and CTO of the massively popular project management program Basecamp. He also is the best-selling co-author of Rework and Remote Office Not Required. Besides David's profound professional achievements, he also went from not having a driver's license at the age of 25 to, at the age of 34, winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans race, which is one of the most prestigious automobile races in the world. David is a father of 3 and a committed husband, and again, just a genius mind to pick, and shared some really fascinating insights from his perspective on being a dad. last question I wanted to ask you is kind of the time machine question of if you could go back in time and give yourself, a piece of advice, but specific to if you can go back to yourself, right when that you're expecting that first kid and he's, getting ready to make his grand entrance in the world. Is there anything that you've really learned over the last 8 years that you would instill upon that younger David and tell him at that stage in the game?
Ignorance is bliss. In connection to what I just said about amor fati, if you have all the answers about how to do the right things ready for you for all intents and purposes, it's almost like and here comes in how many video games I've played. It's almost like putting on a cheat in your favorite game, right? Where you're like, the reason the game is interesting is because it's challenging, because you don't know how the whole thing is going to work, right? I think the reason having your first child is such an all-encompassing moment is because you didn't get the cheat sheet, right? You have to figure some things out, even if you've read 1 million books. Again, the difference between knowing what's in the books and controlling your own actions and behavior. I wouldn't want to know anything. Like I want to go in not cold, because we read a bunch of stuff and I already had all sorts of ideas about how it would go. But like I wanted some of my misconceptions to be misconceptions. I wanted to get refuted by some reality that is this human disproving certain things and illustrating my own mistakes. Like, life is not about just making this ultra smooth journey where everything is just like flat and straight ahead. That's not an interesting journey. Have you ever gone like, oh, well, let's just drive on the highway going 70 miles an hour for like 24 hours straight in a flat land? What the fuck kind of journey is that? Not a proper one, right? Like, let's go some off-site here. Let's go through some shitty weather. The challenge and the opposition and the adversity is part of the experience. In fact, it's half the purpose of the experience. It's half the thing that makes life interesting in the first place, is that you show up and you get it wrong. And so I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but the other answer I often give to that when the question is asked about business is the number one thing to know is that there's not, and I hate this kind of saying because it's been said too much in software development, there's no silver bullet. No one's going to give you one piece of advice that's going to like dramatically change everything about who you are and how you act. No, it's 1,000 pieces of advice, 10,000 pieces of advice. That's what's going to actually set you on the right path. Doesn't mean that there's not a hierarchy and there aren't certain things that are more important than others. But if you fall into the trap of thinking like, what's the secret? Can you tell me the secret? Do you know what? If there was one secret, we'd all fucking know it. Right? Like that wouldn't be a secret for very long if there truly was just one universal saying or maxim that was like, oh shit, that's how I become a wonderful dad? Man, I wish I'd known that. Come on.
David's absolutely right. There is no silver bullet, and it's the ups and the downs in this journey of life that makes it so interesting and so fun. So the final guest that we'll highlight on this particular episode is Brent Gleeson from episode number 10. Brent is a Navy SEAL combat veteran with multiple tours in Iraq and Africa. He's the best-selling author, an award-winning entrepreneur, TV personality, and high-performance leadership expert. He is the CEO of Taking Point Leadership and a regular contributor to Forbes and Inc. magazines. Here's what we gleaned from Brent Gleeson. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. So Brent, if one question I like to close up on is the time machine question. You hear a lot in business podcasts, but kind of reinvented for the family aspect of if you could go back in time and talk to yourself, maybe right before Ryder was born, and impart one piece of parenting wisdom on that younger version of yourself. Is there one thing that you might, one piece of advice or insight that you might give to yourself?
Yeah, I think I would say do a better job of actively managing your list of regrets as a parent now, and active in the moment. Oftentimes, we get to a point where we might look back and say, gosh, I could have done this better. I should have that, or I should have said this, or I should have taught them that, because it's life. We're busy and we have professional careers and, our relationship with our spouse, and you're balancing. We don't often realize it because it becomes normal that as a parent with one child or multiple children and a career and hobbies and other interests, your balancing act can get really, really out of control. But we're not paying attention because it feels normal, even though it's in the midst of chaos. But I guess if I had to choose one off the top of my head, I would say, actively manage that list of regrets. Literally, and I have this in the last chapter of the book, create a model. It says, when it comes to family, I don't want to regret ... When it comes to relationships, I don't want to regret this. When it comes to being a dad, I don't want to regret this. When it comes to being the dad to a son, being the dad to a daughter, those are kind of different things. And then trying to live by those, so it comes down to being better at planning and execution. That's kind of another focus of the new book is being intentional about these things, not just saying, I'm going to be a great parent. Well, life sometimes distracts us from the course of being a quote unquote great parent. And that might mean something different to all of us at different times. And that can be situational too. So, manage that list of regrets now. Make a list of things you don't want to regret when it comes to being a spouse and being, what your definition of a great parent is. And then try to make decisions by that. Try to balance your time based on what you don't want to regret when next thing you know, your kids are grown and they're out of the house and you're thinking, wow, should have done more.
That's a great note from Brent to close up on. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode, the first part 1 of collective advice for new and expecting dads. And even if you're not a newer and expecting dad, hopefully you found this one insightful and maybe found some episodes that you might want to go back and check out. If you did enjoy this episode, or if you've been taking value from the podcast in general, I would really, really appreciate it if you would go ahead and jump on Apple Podcasts or whichever app you listen to your podcast on and leave us a quick rating or review. That's a huge solid and does more than you know to help others discover the podcast. So thanks for being here today. Thanks for being a listener to the show. I appreciate you. Now go out and be the best dad that you can be today.